Good. All right, so guys, how are we doing? Do you want us to get cracking? Siphiwo, are you good to get cracking?
I'm ready. Yeah.
Ah, okay. It seems like we've got an audience of 6 people.
Oh,
Obviously,
great.
yeah, obviously that also includes my colleagues right here. Hello, guys. All right, so yes, thank you. Thank you for making time to chat to me. My name is Musa Hlatshwayo to our viewers. I am here obviously at the UKZN Centre for Creative Arts, and we have the pleasure and the honor of talking to Ubhuti Siphiwo Mahala, who is an author, a everything. I'm not going to even go there because I want to give you the platform to actually introduce yourself. Ukuze singasebenzisa amagama angekho right. Uyayibona loo nto. So my brother, please can I ask you to just introduce yourself to our viewers?
Thanks, Musad. Great to meet you, though albeit virtually.
Sure.
I'm obviously disappointed that I couldn't go to Time of the Writer. It would have been my chance to go after a decade. I think the last time I was on the program was 2009 or thereabouts.
Oh, wow.
And it's a festival that I had been attending for a very long time. I think the very first Time of the Writer Festival I attended was in 2005. So that's where I met Nikum Mhlongo for the first time. And yeah, so I attended Time of the Writer for like at least 10 years in a row.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm glad that we're doing this to make up for this disruption caused by coronavirus.
Yeah.
So yeah, now back to what you asked me to do. My name is Siphiwo Mahala, not Mahala. Okay, I'm Mahala when I'm in KZN. Yeah, and if you are an English first language speaker, you can translate it free gifts. Yeah,
That's actually true, come to think of it. Siphiwo equals gift, Mahala, as Amazulu would say. It's free gift.
Exactly.
Sure.
I'm a lover of books. I've been, yeah, I had a very close relationship with books from a very early age. So when I finally went to university, I studied literature and did a bit of writing at the same time. So my first novel, When a Man Cries, came out in 2007. And I was looking forward to discussing my latest book, which is the 5th book, essentially, under my belt, Red Apple Dreams, which came out towards the end of last year. So yeah, I hope we'll talk a bit about it.
Yeah. Excellent stuff. Thank you so much. It really is sad, Uguti, we are in a state where we cannot have you with us right here at KZN. But hey, CCA has decided.
You can't put a good cause down. We'll continue talking about books online everywhere. Yeah.
For sure. We'll also access other means of communicating as we are doing right now. Yeah. So obviously this is the 23rd Time of the Writer that is hosted by UKZN and CCA. And as you rightly pointed out, Uguti, for Wena, it really is one of those festivals that you really have been following and you are looking forward to taking part in. The very same we could say, Nati, as the consumers of Umsebenzi Wakho Omuhle, Uguti, we really were looking forward to connecting with you and the many other authors that we were hoping to have in the same space. But hey, we have to do what we have to do, you know, better safe than sorry. Red Apple Dreams and Other Stories. Talk to me about the book, the concept, where did it all start, and you know what's going on? Aha, look at that beautiful baby. Look at that beautiful baby. Talk to me about the concept, my brother. So 20-something-year-old manifestation, you know, beautiful stories, most of them written by you and some of them contributed by some of the people whose work you really admire. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, actually, what happened last year, actually 2018, I sat back to think, about the work that I've been doing. I published my very first short story in 2001. And, I continued writing short story throughout. I write short story. I don't wait until the time when I have to publish to write a short story. If an idea hits me, I just put pen to paper or sit in front of my laptop and put something together. So I have these many short stories that I've been writing over the years, some published, some unpublished.
Yeah.
And then, I got to a point to say, I've been doing this thing for close to 20 years now, and some of these stories, people don't know them, and I can't even access myself. So I decided to go look for those stories, those that were published, and I spoke to the various publications and got the rights to reproduce them, and then I combined those with my literary influences, so to speak. Because what I did is that as you grow as a writer, there are certain writers that influence you. One way or another, you respond to certain writers, sometimes consciously, sometimes subconsciously. So some of those writers, where I could say subconsciously, is Njabulo Ndebele, whose work I really love. And, as I started writing, I did not realize that in some ways my work had allusions with Njabulo Ndebele's work. So I decided, and so some critics picked that up. Similarly, with Kentemba, for instance, I was very conscious in responding to Kentemba, his suit. As a result, me having responded to Kentemba's The Suit, a number of other writers have done the same. And a lot of papers have been written about us. So I decided, since there's so much discussion around intertextuality, the intergenerational dialogue that is happening between myself, Kentemba, and Zubi Savannah, why not put them together in a single publication so that readers and critics generally out there can actually have the opportunity to read all of these stories in a single publication. And lastly, I started to put together my new works, which is quite exciting. Those works include, for instance, another intertextual allusion to James Matthews's The Park, which was published back in 1958. So I wrote The Park Continued. And then several other new stories like Old Man's Horse or No Man's Land, some of which really tackle topical issues today.
That's beautiful. And well done on self-publishing, just by the way. That really is a very huge achievement. And I think we need to acknowledge that. We can't just brush it off as though, oh yeah, I just kind of self-published it. Well done, my brother. That is excellence right there. So in your book, you also started off with this beautiful introduction where you really do give us a sense of where it all started. Yes, you have just mentioned some of your influences and where it all started academically, but we cannot ignore the fact that it really all started with you and your grandmother around the fire. Tell us about that one, because I really found that as a fascinating story.
Yeah, actually, it's in retrospect to say, as writers, we are not so sophisticated. You are not so different from an old lady sitting around the fire telling stories. And for me, the combination of oral narratives with written literature is essential in storytelling. And as someone who studied both, that comes out a lot in my writing. And I had to do self-introspection, so to speak, and say, where did this begin? And indeed, to me, it's oral narratives. For instance, I talk about how my grandmother could, tell stories at any given time, and I make an example of the moment where she told a story while busy with the pillow, make an example of how she made pillows that she would take an old sack, stuff it with old clothes, and then stitch its mouth. And then when the pillow is soiled and needs to be washed, she would have to pillow, take out the items that she stuffed into that pillow. And with every item that she takes out, she would tell a story about it. For an example, she would she would say, this piece of cloth is from my old blouse. This is the blouse I was wearing when your grandfather noticed me amongst all other girls. And then she goes on and tells how she met our grandmother, our grandfather, sorry. And then the story goes on and on and on. So a story that begins with a piece of cloth ends up becoming a long narrative about family history. And in so many ways, this is the kind of approach that Kentemba uses. And that's what fascinates me about his work, especially, that he does not have to look for anything sensational. The suit, for instance, which is featured in the story, for all material reason, it's a piece of cloth. So how do you develop a story from a piece of cloth, and a story that would have its appeal for over 5 decades? So for me, this is all about the simplicity of storytelling, that you don't have to look for something sensational. You get stories from our daily lives. Anything can result in a story. Yep.
And from the things that are around you and in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely. Stories surround us on a daily basis. It's about how you tell it more than what to tell. Yep.
Beautiful. I see audience here too is really expanding, and I can see Usakile really alluding to the fact that your story truly is inspiring. So thank you so much for that. So, Center for Creative Arts and Time of the Writer has given us a theme, Mina Nawe, to kind of keep this discussion under. Locating the truth, then and now. Yeah. What is the truth, Kwena? What is your truth? What is the truth that you are sharing in this book, Red Apple Dreams and Other Stories?
Well, I think for me, every writer has a responsibility to give their own perspective, their own truths. And writing short stories, for instance, allows you to explore different aspects of our lives, and that is the truth you bring forward. I'll make an example. The very last story in the collection, No Man's Land, it is my truth. Land means different people to different, different things to different people.
For sure.
And in this particular story, I decided to say, look, much as land is a commercial issue to some, much as land would be, a tourism thing to others, but to others it's also a heritage issue. And hence you have a character who decides to visit his ancestral land, trying to find his roots, and which are in conflict. This is a quest that is in conflict with those who occupy the land for commercial reasons.
Wow, that really is moving. I also do agree with you. I think issues of land really do need to be addressed in whatever medium that we can use, we really need to talk about issues of land and any other issues related to history and the politics of South Africa. Now, if we were to move on to Amayama stories that you beautifully put in your book, for instance, I love Bonsi's toe, and I want you to correct me on the pronunciation of his name, because he's one of my favorite characters. How do you say it? Bonsi?
Yeah, that's correct. Bonsi's toe.
Bonsi's toe.
Yeah.
My brother, how do you do this? How do you put together such a beautifully moving story with this character that we really start falling in love with as some sort of a superhero, despite the circumstances that he finds himself in? But then at the end, you leave us wanting more. You leave us searching. You really leave us bleeding in a way, but also with the mirror facing our side. How do you do this?
That's actually interesting because Bonsi's toe, I first published it in my previous collection, African Delights.
Right.
And strangely, it seems like now, it's only now that people really get to notice it. I'm saying that because the first person to talk about Bonsi's toe.
Really? And why? Why do you think that is so? Why do you think, Uguti, it's only now that people are really noticing it and that it kind of rings a bell to so many of us?
I'm really not sure. Maybe people, it touched people the same way back then. But now, because I'm distributing the book on my own and I get to interact with audiences, so I get to know exactly what people think, what is the people's reaction to my stories. So, as a result, Bonsi's toe seems to be one of the most prominent in this collection. In any case, Bonsi's toe it's a story very close to my heart. It's a story that simmered in my mind for a very long time, to such an extent that when I sat down to write, I wrote it from beginning to end at one go. So it's mainly because it's a story that's inspired by a real life incident. When I grew up in the 80s in India, there's someone who lived and perished in more or less the same way you find in the story of Bonsi's toe. Obviously, Bonsi is not his name. If you don't know, Bonsi is the toe in isiXhosa.
Yes.
And you know the context of the toe in the story. So well, I sometimes get a bit emotional to talk about the story, but I think I can just say it's a story very close to my heart. It's a story that essentially wrote itself. I sat in front of the laptop, and when I got up, the story was finished.
Wow. Wow. Yes, the funny thing is, having grown up playing soccer, kwamaphumulo, I have grown to believe ukuthi maybe every young black man out there has had an encounter with some kind of ubonzi, in the same way that you put him out there. You know, that kind of superhero who really saves the team every now and then, that kind of character that we look at emakhaya or elokishini, and maybe we don't pay that much attention, but in spaces where we have to go out there, siyodlala ibhola, or go out fishing, or just go out looking for our mushrooms, we really find ourselves really honoring him because of the many skills that he brings into our lives. The sad thing that happens with ubonzi, you know, you draw these two parallel worlds where we've got his friends playing at Damini, you know, playing with Amadada and Izhlilingi. We call them Izhlilingi in isiZulu. Notoriously killing the ducks. A very carefree yet painful kind of a scene that builds something that you can feel ukuthi this is leading to some form of discomfort. And then we learn to discover of Bonsi's death, a pile of ashes and his big toe. What do we do with Bonsi's big toe? What do we do with his ashes? What do we do with this pain that we are left with every time we think of the ashes and the big toe? What does it resemble in nowadays society? Having known it to be that one particular object that really saved us, that weapon of mass destruction, even when we were losing as a team. But here it is, just lying lifelessly on a pile of ashes.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think it was Lupin Mayisa who once said that there's a Bonsi in every community. So I draw from characters, that I grew up with. As I say, yeah, Bonsi in particular is inspired by a real life incident. And but looking at Bonsi, you think of all the young boys whose childhood was robbed by the fact that they had to fend for themselves.
Yes.
You think of toxic masculinity. Where does it begin?
Yes.
Do we grow up as innocent children, responsible, and then all of a sudden we become abusive? So what I try to do there is to draw parallels between young boys killing ducks and adults killing human beings. So I think society needs to pay attention to boys, to the boy child.
Yes.
If we want to have responsible men, we must start where it begins, by ensuring that boys grow up as boys, are allowed to be children, and we curb violence from an early age. Yeah.
Wow, I couldn't have said it much better myself. So, in your introduction, you also speak about short stories really being the future. Yeah? If I may quote, you say short stories are enjoying the finest hour since the dawn of democracy in South Africa. Truth be told, short story as a written form is the future. Please unpack that.
Yeah, look, first of all, let me make an example. When I wanted to publish my first short story collection, African Delights, 2010, 2011, many publishers had written on their websites that they do not publish short stories, but what I did, I bypassed that with Shakana and convinced them to publish my short story collection. They published very few at the time. I think at the time the other author I can think of is Diane Elberg, who published a collection of stories that year. But gradually, the interest in short story writing increased, and I would say from 2013. We had reached a point where short stories were now becoming the in thing. This year alone, several short story collections are coming out. And almost every year there's a new exciting short story writer. And some of them actually winning international awards. If you think of the likes of Masandi and Chala, the Luli Dudu Malingani. These are guys who are essentially restoring the status of short story writing in South Africa. At some point, actually, if you go back to the 50s, the drum generation, those guys produced far more short stories, and the most iconic short stories in the country. They were not so great novelists. Actually, not so many of these novels were published at the time. So now, why this sudden upsurge of short story writing? I would attribute it to two things. One, digital media makes it more convenient for shorter prose on the one hand, but on the other, people, we're living in very busy times, and short stories become convenient. That even at work during lunchtime, you need like 15-20 minutes to read a short story and put it aside. You can read two others in the evening when you get home, so you are not left hanging. In a short space of time, you are able to read and finish one story, and then you can move to the next. And that's why also it's convenient to me as a writer that when an idea strikes me, I don't have to align it with a particular theme. If an idea comes out now, I sit and write. And that's why I was able, for instance, to write a story like Musa Hlatshwayo in one sitting.
Yeah. Wow, truly awesome. I do need to say hello to those that have just joined us. Hello, welcome. Feel free to write your questions and or your comments with my brother here, Siphiwo Mahala. We are still talking. Now, building up to what you have just said, Budwami, again, understanding and celebrating the fact that Red Apple Dreams and Other Stories is self-published. Talk to us about the challenges and the kind of freedom that you had to experience when self-publishing Red Apple Dreams and Other Stories. Look,
self-publishing has been the most liberating experience for me in as far as writing books, in the sense that I had to decide what I want and how I want it. But it is not without challenges. Generally, self-publishing is perceived to be an endeavor of less quality, and understandably so, because many people who self-publish just decide, driven by their egos, that I've written something good and therefore I'm gonna print it and have it, bound, nicely bound. But that's not what publishing is all about. So, having been through the mainstream publishing over the years, I published my first novel in 2007, and I had been publishing since 2001. So I've been in this industry for almost 20 years now as a writer.
Wow.
And
wow.
I realized that over the years, what you do, you publish with an established publisher who obviously covers the costs for publishing. So they have to take their share, which would be like 30% of the retail price or so, if they are lucky. Most of the time, about 20% actually. And then you need to get this book to the bookstores. The person who takes the book from the warehouse to the bookstore is called distributor.
Right.
They demand about 30% of the retail price. And then you have the bookseller who rents office space or a shop in a shopping mall, and who have staff to pay, and therefore they take anything between 30 and 40% of the retail price. Tell me how much is left for the author, So I've decided that, and actually over and above that, it is the responsibility of the author to make appearances, to market their book, and make sure that it continues to sell. So with all of that, I felt like if I'm able to follow all the processes of publishing, in as far as quality control is concerned, that is, get an editor. Sorry, my co-author has just joined us. Her name is Gufi.
Hello, Kunle.
Yeah. So, Valumnyango. Yeah. I decided that I can do all of these things on my own and save. In other words, I got an editor. I worked with the same editor that I worked with when I published with mainstream publishers. I followed the same process of getting a proofreader. I followed the same process of hiring a typesetter, and as well as getting a professional designer. So this is to ensure that the work is of good quality, the same I would get from a mainstream publisher.
Sure.
And then now that I have the book, the next step is to make sure that it is out there. And this has been the major challenge in this self-publishing route, because most booksellers out there have this perception that a self-published book is not of good quality. So one had to come up with a strong marketing and distribution strategy to ensure that the book gets to the reader's hands. And I can say after 5 months or so of having published the book, so far so good. I've managed to reach audiences far and wide. And the most remarkable thing about it is that I get my return on investments instantly, as opposed to when I publish with mainstream publishers. You get your royalties once a year, and which you obviously has already been split 4 ways, and added to that there's tax. So now I get my money immediately, and start planning for the next print run. And this is the route that I think I'm gonna follow henceforth.
Amazing stuff, amazing stuff. Now, I'm curious about your relationship as an author with your editor, and also the relationship that you yourself as Siphiwo has with the publisher that you now are. Uguti, what are the kinds of discussions and or arguments that you all need to go through, particularly when looking at issues of the use of language? Most authors that are not self-published, who also depend on editors that are maybe not fully used to the context under which their work is written, have always argued about the issue of language being one of those that makes them really feel censored. Here you are in this beautiful collection of these beautiful stories using English as a medium of expression, but in a way that I, as an African, as Umzulu, I can almost hear all these characters that are within these stories that speak directly to me. We've always spoken about issues of, for instance, how our vernacular languages use izibabazo, and sometimes we can literally summarize a paragraph with just unqa, but obviously through the restrictions of expression when it comes to the language, and also the censorship that one might experience with some editors and publishers, we are not able to articulate that. Talk to me about that relationship and even the journey towards formulating this language where you are able to still use English in a way that I can hear is Xhosa Sakho.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Unfortunately, that the editor that I'm working with, I've been working with her for almost 10 years now with other publications. I think you need an editor who understands you, who won't compromise your authorial voice. In other words, as you rightfully observe,
Yes.
when I write, I think and write in my mother tongue, but I express it through the English language. In other words, I make English understand is a Xhosa. That is the value that we bring to the English language, because quite frankly, I do not create new English words. I'm likely to to bring new ways to English language. However, I can bring new expressions. I steal from a language and use those expressions in the English language. And by so doing, I almost force the English speaker to see the world from my point of view. I'll make an example. If, for instance, you are from England, it is understandable when you say something is as white as snow. But someone from Ehlutluwe, how often do they see the snow? But every morning they see milk. They interact with milk on a daily basis. And therefore, something would make more sense to them if you say it is as white as milk. So hence, taking from that point, one stretches it and tries to use some of the idioms that would sort of enhance the imagery of the reader. For instance, if you read a story like The Old Man's Horse, the imagery that one draws of a village, if you've lived in any village, you'd sort of understand where one comes from. And one even gets to make use of, for instance, the house has been singing a dung beetle. If you were to translate that, actually that is a direct translation of Indlu Ikali Bungane, for instance. So that is how I import isiXhosa expressions into the English language.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So we will keep saying hello to those that are joining us. My name is Musa Hlatshwayo. I am at the UKZN's Center for Creative Arts, and this is part of our 23rd time of the writer. And as you can see, I'm talking to my brother, Siphiwo Mahala, who is the author and the publisher of his own work, Red Apple, Dreams, and Other Stories. But back to the introduction, there's a point where you speak about how at some point, some of the works that you associate with were beautifully interpreted by actors who were reading it. How important is it for you to cross-pollinate between art forms? How important is it to have actors really accessing short stories and interpreting them in their own way, the same as dancers really choreographing works like Suit, as we have seen here in Durban? The Fantastic Flying Fish Dance Company in 2002 produced the Suit, which was choreographed and performed by Budwami Uboizi. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, for some reason, the reception is getting really bad now. I missed part of your question, but I understand you talk about cross-pollination. I think cross-pollination, especially nowadays, is an essential aspect of the creative industries. I'm an advocate of that. Much as we promote reading of books, but there are other means of reaching audience. Sometimes, for instance, many people got introduced to Ken Temba's work through a stage play, and some would read my story, and then because it alludes to Ken Temba's story, they go out and look for it. So there are so many ways in which you first ensure cross-pollination between texts within the same genre, that is short stories, cross-pollination between art disciplines, so short stories especially lend themselves in that realm that, you can produce a play out of a short story, you can produce a film, anything. So for someone like me, I grew up in Makanda, Grahamstown, and I lived the art throughout my life. I started off with drawing before I could even write. So my journey has been like that, from oral narratives, drawing, actually drawing sketches, because some of my first works were to draw picture stories, So there is a connection between the various genres. They are all forms of storytelling. So what you do, you say, in 2020, how best can I optimize my chances of telling stories to broader audiences beyond my immediate audience, which is the readers. And, The Suit, for instance, is one story that stands out as the best example, because The Suit was written in 1963.
Yes.
It has been turned into a graphic story. It has been turned into a play. It has been turned into a musical, touring almost 30 countries around the world. It has been turned into several short films. There's Kidzo Elliott's film. There's the Jorit Kudzie's film, which features John Gani and his son, Atandwa. So there's so much you can do with a short story. And I think it's a worthy investment in the sense that you might dedicate a day or two writing a short story, but it would have an impact that would last more than your lifetime.
Wow, very nice indeed. I was saying earlier on, I think that's the part that you missed, Uti, in almost the same way as you've just given us that beautiful list of the other mediums through which Isuti has been accessed, Uti. Even la KZN, we have had the pleasure of a fantastic Flying Fish Dance Company producing The Suit as choreographed by Uboizi Tsewane under the direction of Robert Whitehead, with a score being created by Utoli Noman. And that was back in 2002. And it premiered here in Durban, but I also do believe the Market Theatre in Johannesburg did stage it at some point, and it really, really was a beautiful production. So I totally agree with you. I suppose one of the things that you also do very well in this book, which kind of interests me, would be responding to one's work, almost in the same way as you decided to respond to Ken Temba's The Suit with The Suit Continued. Talk to us about that. Where did that come from? Why the need to respond to that story, ngaleyo ndlela, and what were you hoping to add or to clarify or to bring into the brand of The Suit and or the idea behind The Suit, or just to us as people who enjoy both Ken Temba's work as well as your work?
Yeah, writing The Suit Continued happened organically, in the sense that I had written my very first published story, which is featured in Readable Dreams, Mbumi's Assignment. So in 2000, where I read Mbumi's Assignment, and the feedback that I got was that
yes,
it reminded them of Ken Temba's The Suit. And when that happens, the first reaction is to get an impression that you are being accused of plagiarizing, So I went back to The Suit, reread it, and read it several times to try and understand this insinuation of plagiarism. And I got to understand that it's not plagiarism per se, but there's some kind of intertextual allusion that is not direct. With regard to, in Mbumi's Assignment, for instance, you have this man, his wife finding an earring in their bedroom, and then the wife asks whose earring this is, and then the man says it's a ring. and the wife forces him to wear it, going to work, and being a school principal wearing an earring becomes something comical. And yeah, so in the suit, you have something similar where the woman is forced to carry the suit around and dish food for it, treat it as a visitor. So now, after reading the suit so many times, I was left wondering what happened to the men that jumped out the window. Because the punishment that we see happening is towards a woman who was not cheating alone, you know. So I had to reimagine the journey from just after the man jumped out the window and tried to trace his journey to wherever he was going. So with that, I had to develop the character of the suit itself. So I gave the suit the man's wallet, meaning his money is there, he had to get it back. I gave the suit the man's house keys, meaning he does not have access to his own house. And thirdly, I gave the suit the man's pass. Remember, this is a story that's happening in the 1950s, before 1955, most certainly, because it's set in Sofia Town, when men could not, a man without a pass was reduced to nothing. So with those things, one was able to develop a story having also developed the character of the suit. And developing the character of the suit also raises the need for the man to go back to the house and retrieve the suit. So that's how the story of the suit continued, developed. But there are dangers with that. On the one hand, to reimagine an existing story and a classic, in the sense, the suit is a very brave endeavor. I must say I was not thinking about that when I started writing. But secondly, there is the question of the risk of anachronism, in the sense that you are writing a story that is set in a period when even your parents had not met, you know, in the 50s. So one had to do a bit of research, understand what it is that people drank at the time, what kind of music they listened to, what kind of dance, what kind of clothes they wore, and all such things. So one had to do a thorough research on Sofia Town of the 50s. Yeah.
Right. That's beautiful. So I really am enjoying this, and I was hoping, Uguti, some of the people that keep joining us are also going to contribute with maybe questions and comments. I can see, for instance, we've got Zanele Dlamini who's joined us, and we've got Ushafina's Hasim as well, and the many others. But we are obviously going to go on with this conversation as we try to bring it towards a close, because we are unfortunately going to have to bring things to a wrap because of time. But I'm also then wondering, Uguti, in building up to the very same thing that we are talking about, the suit continued. Then came Uzukiswa Wena with the dress that fed the suit, which you then include in Red Apple Dreams. Why? What did it say to you that you felt, ooh, okay, now this one speaks to me, and it really speaks to the concept of Red Apple Dreams and other stories?
Yeah, interestingly, in 2006, March 2006, I met Zugeza Vanner at Time of the Writer for the first time, and then I gave her a copy of Where's Gone Too Soon, a tribute to Case Lotiker and Paswan Mpe, which featured the suit continued. Mm-hmm. And she obviously liked the story. She told me, but later on, what she did was to respond now to my take and Kentemba's take on the subject. So what that means is that, as I indicated, that the suit is about a love triangle. First, the man, the husband, is the one who essentially we can say is the protagonist who pushes the original story of Kentemba, and he interacts with his wife. But is muted. We didn't get what she went through. As a result, Zukiswa decided that since the woman's voice is unheard in all of this, she's gonna write from the perspective of Matilda. So because Matilda dies in the original story in an apparent suicide, so Zukiswa Vanner decided to write what is essentially a suicide note,
right,
revealing the troubles that Matilda went through that led to her death. So I felt like it's an important contribution in this love triangle because it closes the gap that Kentemba and myself left out. So the dress that fed the suit brings the woman's voice, who is central in the entire suit story.
Very strong voice indeed. I have to say bravo to Uzukiswa Wena on that one. So now, my brother, other than being obviously a writer as well as a publisher now, what are other means of promoting and preserving this culture of short story telling can we receive from you? For instance, here in Durban, we've got Gcinamasiko Heritage, which is the foundation ka Mam Gcina, really creating platforms like the Storytelling Tree, where I think once a month writers and the lovers of books and storytelling can gather around a tree and just enjoy the beauty of storytelling. So what can we expect from Siphiwo Mahala from in the near future, or what is even currently happening around the spaces where you are?
Yeah, thanks. Sorry if the technology is doing tricks on me, but I caught out of what you're saying. Look, I think the world now allows us, actually refuses barriers to say I'm a writer and therefore I cannot sell books or I cannot publish. When I say this thing, I was kind of rigid to say the duty of the writer is to write. Indeed, it is to write, but I mean, to get the nation reading, we need a little bit extra effort. And in this regard, I think generally book clubs are doing the most in supporting writers and promoting South African literature generally. And social media is helping a great deal in terms of promoting our works. But also generally, we have to sell a different narrative. And this is part of what, we were doing when I was head of books and publishing at Ascent Culture some years ago, where we tried to promote, reading as a lifestyle. And we tried to encourage, everyone, including government departments, to establish book clubs. And right now, I think it's a great initiative that, for instance, the president of the country, Cyril Ramaphosa, is doing, trying to encourage the establishment of virtual book clubs for youth in particular. So I think much as we go out there to promote reading and everything, it begins with an individual.
Right.
You have to create time for reading on a daily basis. I have a lot happening in my life, but I can't go to bed without reading the works of other writers. And it also expands to family, that if you want to create the next generation of readers, you want bigger markets in the future, you have to try and influence your own family. And for me, part of that is to make sure that books are readily available in the house. That's one. Two, was to encourage everyone to have reading time. There was what, when we were campaigning, we called Reading Hour, whereby everyone in the household at any given time, or rather at a specific time, sits down to read, whether you're reading a comic book or a magazine, a newspaper, a novel, or even a religious text.